Hi everyone, welcome to my studio floor. We're going to be making bias tape today because I'm running out of it. The entire country is running out of it and we need to make more masks for our doctors. So first we'll look at this piece of bias tape. This is what it looks like. It's about a 1/2 inch wide when it's folded. It's called double fold bias tape. That's what we're making. And you open it once, you open it twice, because you fold it double times, twice, right? Even though that's 3, we don't like to follow the rules of counting in sewing. So this is 2 inches wide to start with. So that's what we're going to start with on the cutting mat right here, is by cutting 2-inch wide strips on the bias. And bias means that it is at a 45-degree angle. So fabric, the fibers are woven at 90-degree angle to each other, right? Straight up and down and straight across. And when we cut on the bias, that means we're cutting across at a 45-degree angle. So that's where we're gonna start. And I'm gonna flatten out my fabric because I was just laying on it and now it's all wrinkled. Okay. All right, so the fibers go this way, 90-degree angle. I'm gonna lay this down at a 45, and I know where it is because my cutting mat has a 45-degree line that I'm gonna use to set up my ruler right there. And use my rotary cutter to cut that first strip. Well, it's not really a strip yet because it's just 2 pieces of fabric, but there we go. And this ruler is 1 inch wide, and I know I need 2 inches to make a strip, so I'm just gonna really carefully flip it once, flip it twice, try to make sure it's still kind of on a 45-degree line. We're eyeballing it, it's fine. We're eyeballing it. You might not eyeball it, but I am, because I don't mind not being entirely perfectly precise. Okay. So now I have 1 strip, and that's not going to be long enough. I need about 36 inches, so like 1 yard of this bias tape in order to make a full string for the mask. So we'll also be able to go to the sewing machine in a bit, and we will sew a couple pieces together, which I think is kind of the trickiest part of this process. So I'll show you my little trick to get them right, and I have done it wrong many times in the past and gotten really wonky and backwards, and you know, where the strips end up like this instead of straight across. It's bad. So we're gonna do our best. I've now got 2 pieces, so I can show you how to sew them together. Okay, so like I said, this is the part that's kind of tricky, the part of sewing these 2 strips into 1 strip. So normally when you're making a seam and sewing together 2 pieces of fabric, you just lay them with their fronts together, or their faces together, and you sew a straight line. But if you do just a straight seam like that, when we fold this bias tape up, where that seam is, all that fabric is going to end up stacked on top of each other, and it's going to be really bulky. So instead of sewing a straight seam on a bias strip, you have to sew an angled seam with 45-degree angle again. And that means that you also end up sewing with your pieces of fabric like this and the seams lined up, and it can get really tricky if you don't cut it ahead of time. So that's my trick. This piece right here is already at a 45-degree angle, and I need to match up so that this strip has a 45-degree angle going in the same direction, or opposite direction, same direction, whatever. It needs to be cut this way. So I layer them on top of each other and cut along that same angle of the fabric that already had the 45. That's a little scrap now. And then I'll flip this over so that these are lined up. And I'm gonna pin them together so that they don't go anywhere while I turn to my sewing machine. Okay, so a sewing project is not a real sewing project until you mess up at least once, and I just did. So I'm going to tell you how to fix this problem that you will probably come across as well. So I sewed these together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then when I unfold it and straighten it out, it's not actually straight because I lined up the seam allowance edge and not the stitching edge. So here's what we do. I'm just gonna cut right inside this stitching line and throw that bit away. Now, when you line up these edges right here, you're gonna have little funny tails about a 1/2 inch out on each side, so that when you sew that 1/2 inch in, you're going from here to here, not here to here. Okay? So we're gonna try this again. Now this time, when we unfold it, we still have these funny little bits at the top, but we just trim those off. And now it's a straight piece of fabric, not offset and all crazy like the first time I did it. So that's tip number 2, offset your seams. Okay, here we go with the last step of the process, which is the ironing. The first bit we're gonna iron is this seam allowance. We're gonna iron it open. And I'm also going to trim it a little. I did a 1/2 inch seam allowance. That's kind of big. Makes it easy to sew, but then we trim it down just to eliminate some of that bulkiness for when we are using it as a bias tape. Okay, so that's trimmed, it's ironed flat, and now we iron the tape into a fold. So at the beginning I showed you the piece of bias tape from the store. So it gets folded in approximately a 1/4 inch or so on each edge. And this you just have to be really patient with this process and press, move it down and press, And while you're pressing on the iron over here, I'm kind of using my other hand to fold in the next bit of the tape. Press and fold and press and fold. Have our first fold in the bias tape, and we're gonna go and do the second one, fold it in half. And I find, here's another trick, if you're pressing it and it pops up like that a lot, you can hold it down, spritz it with a little bit of water, and then press down. And that way it kind of, if the fabric is drying in that position, it remembers to stay folded better. So that's my other trick for making bias tape, is use a little water, or if you have steam on your iron, you can steam it instead of using the spray bottle. And there you go, your own piece of homemade bias tape. Ta-da!